Hey guys, Art's Backpacking 360, and today we're going to take a little bit closer look at a new pair of men's Oboz Fire Brand 2. We're also going to discuss a few questions on why I chose these particular pair of shoes, because that's pertinent as to why you're watching this video in the first place, along with a few tips and things you need to ask yourself when you are out choosing your first pair of hiking boots or a new pair of hiking boots, whatever the case may be. And lastly, we're going to go over some things that I've learned over the years on how to fit a pair of shoes yourself, because the shoe salesman can only do so much for you. So let's get started. All right, so first off, let me state I am not a shoe salesman. I am not a shoe rep in any way, shape, or form. I'm not a cobbler. What I am is someone who spent a lot of years in the trenches, backpacking. As relatives know, I'm a meat cutter by trade, so I spend many hours every day, always on my feet, on cold concrete floors. And I got to tell you, if the shoes that you're wearing don't fit you right and they're not decent shoes, if you got 4 miles left in the trail or a couple hours left in your shift and your dogs are barking, it just makes for misery. So getting the right shoe, making sure that it fits right, and all that good stuff is all really important. So on the broad spectrum of hiking and backpacking footwear, on one end of the spectrum you have your heavy boots, okay, something like that, all right. On the other end of the spectrum you have your trail runners, something that looks like a glorified tennis shoe. It's a little bit heavier duty, so forth and so on. People that wear the backpacking boots will tell you that they need it for to keep their feet warm. They need it for support. They need it to protect their feet from rocks and stones and sticks and bugs and snake bites and all sorts of stuff. And those are all perfectly valid reasons. On the other end of the spectrum, the ultralight trail runners will tell you that their feet don't sweat as much, that they can move much quicker on the trail. They can cover more miles in a day. They like to be able to feel the trail under their feet. They just feel more connected to the trail when they're wearing something that's much lighter. If they have to cross a stream or a creek, they can wear their shoes while they're drying out. They dry much quicker. And those are all perfectly valid reasons also. So depending on where you are. My thoughts on it are, if you're carrying a heavy pack, or you're a big boned person, or both, a pair of boots might do you better. On the other hand, if you're slight of frame and you've dove right into wanting to be a backpacker and you're going to go ultralight right from the get-go, which is a base weight of well under 20 pounds, most of these guys are carrying between 14 and 17 pounds, you might be better off with a pair of trail runners. All right, so many years ago when I got into backpacking, my pack was heavy. I wore an old external frame and I took everything I needed, and if there was room left in the pack, then there must be something I was forgetting. So I'd find something and I'd put it in there. I'd carry stuff till the pack was full, and quite often my pack was probably somewhere between, I don't know, probably 50, 60 pounds. Back then I didn't even weigh it. And I wore boots automatically. I grew up in the country. Boots were the first thing. I didn't even question it. Boots were what I got. So jumping forward to present day, a lot of things have changed. My pack is much lighter. I'm well under 20 pounds. And people like Ray Jardine and others who have put ultralight backpacking on the map, no pun intended, things have changed a lot. Gear has gotten much more high-tech. There's a lot of aluminum out there. Things have changed. So in my quest to lighten up my pack without, I'm kind of picky. I don't like to give up any of the creature comforts. So my pack could be lighter, but I'm about where I want to be. I'm not exactly sure. I haven't weighed it yet this season. But my boots were not working for me. They felt very, I like to use the term clumpy. They didn't ride. They didn't roll well on the trail for me. They were sweaty. I bought them after I did the John Muir Trail because my old boots were pretty much worn out. They were an old pair of Solos, and These ones have a leather liner, so my feet sweat a lot, and they They were stiff and they didn't work well. Good boots, they just weren't working well. So looking at everything else outside of my pack, I determined that overall one of the ways that I could decrease the weight of my pack was to take a look at my feet. And so I decided that I wanted to try to go lighter on the footwear that I was wearing. So I checked out a number of places. I ended up down at REI, and I tried on some of the trail runners that they had. I think they had Solomon's and North Face and a lot of different brands out there. And I can tell you right now, rule number one, do not be in a hurry. Do not expect to go into a shoe store and say, I'm going to go buy a pair of hiking shoes, and go in there and find the right pair and say, good, I got them, and then leave, because that usually doesn't happen. There are so many different brands out there that it takes quite a bit of time to really determine whether or not the shoe is right for you. So in short, I ended up with these Oboz because the Solomon's and some of the trail runners, the uppers were a lighter weight mesh, and I quite often will do a lot of cross-country bushwhacking, peak bagging, and I'm up in the talus and rocks, and I was afraid that the uppers would just get torn up. So I went with the Oboz because they're much more solid on the upper half, and we're going to take a look at them real quick. About $135, I think. I will state that they're about the same price on Amazon as they are at REI. So for those of you who think that you can go to REI and try them on and then buy them on Amazon, you're better off to purchase them at some place like REI that has a good return policy, just in case whatever happens, they fall apart, or you wear them around the house on the carpet for a night or two and you decide they're not comfortable and you want to return them. It's a whole lot easier than doing that on Amazon. So anyways, that's what they look like. You can go online and you can look at close-up photographs, and you can really zoom in on the individual photos that they have. These are a relatively stiff, similar to a hiking boot. They're a low cut. These are the waterproof version. The non-waterproof version was what I originally wanted, but I was having some problems with heel slippage on them. And there again is things I was talking about, was I discovered that the design of this shoe was just ever so slightly different than the non-waterproof version. The only thing I can come up with was that either the lacing at the top was a little bit higher, or the heel cup back here where it cups the back of your Achilles tendon maybe cuts in a little bit more and grab the back of my heel a little bit more. I don't know for sure, but these fit better. Okay, so they've got a good toe rand on the front. They've got decent cleatage on the bottom, which is maybe a little bit soft compared to some of the backpacking boots I've worn in the past. I don't know, we'll see. That means that they're going to grip better on granite and such, but they might wear out faster in the long run. You're liable to lose that the lugs on there. So one of the things that I do when I try on a pair of shoes is I test the sole. This is just a habit I got into, and basically what I do is I put 3 fingers over the top of the toe box like so, and I take my thumb and I put it right dead center in the middle of that shoe, and then I push in as hard as I can. And if you find a pair of shoes where that caves in on you, and cheaper shoes will do that very easily, that will tell you that there's just not a lot of support. You can also take it and twist it sideways. If they twist sideways, if you can twist it into a figure 8 really easy, they might not be the best for you. These are relatively stiff, so I wanted some support, but I wanted something lighter. I wanted a low-cut shoe. This has a synthetic liner as opposed to my leather boots had a leather liner. Most of the upper is made of nubuck leather in through here. This portion right here is a synthetic mesh, which is much heavier duty than the ones that I was looking at on the trail runners. They seem to be a much softer, look like they would tear up a lot easier. Don't know that to be a fact, but just my thoughts. Okay, the tongues are gusseted because this is the waterproof version. So gusseted means that the tongue is connected to the side of the shoe, which means that rocks and water and such won't get down inside there. As far as waterproofing goes, I've never found a pair of shoes when this one uses what they call, Oboz calls B-Dry. Every company has their own brand of synthetic liner that they put in there as a waterproofer, and I've never yet found one that is 100% waterproof. Over time, it just starts to leak. That's what it is. It also will cause your feet to sweat more, but hopefully these being a low-cut boot with a synthetic liner instead of that leather liner, hopefully this won't be as much a problem for me. These are a stiff, really good stiff, stout shoe. They're not like a trail runner. They've got a lot more oomph to them. They're like a boot. They're just like low cut, which is really exactly what I wanted. Okay, something else that Oboz does, and I think they do it with most of their hiking shoes, which is really cool. The difference between my boot that I was wearing and the Oboz is the boot on the heel is very square, comes straight across and straight up. The Oboz uses what I think they call a rocker sole, which if you look at the back of it, it's got a nice sweep to it. The toe is turned up a little bit so that when you walk, it tends to move a lot easier, not hitting a hard square cut heel on there. Hence the term I used on those boots, clomping. The other thing that I noticed on these boots that took me a long time to figure out was I felt like the heel was more elevated than most of the boots I've had in years past. So on uphill it was great because it felt like I was on level ground. On downhill, and see when they elevate the heels, which they do in most athletic shoes, the elevated heel is basically designed for forward motion. So it keeps you moving forward. Too much of an elevated heel can be a bad thing, particularly on downhill. Those shoes were really rough on me on downhills. This shoe, I feel like I'm sitting much more level with that rocker panel and the toes turned up a little bit. I think these are going to work much, much better. Now that I finally am going to get this video out, I get to go wear them today. And yeah, I know I didn't want to wear them until after I did the video. So one last thing I wanted to discuss is the inserts in these guys are some of the best I've ever seen. Most inserts that they put in shoes are just a cheap afterthought. There's some type of just cheap foam, and I don't know if they do that because it just costs too much to make a decent insert, or if it's because they know you're going to take them out and replace them with a better insert anyways. Either way, Oboz, and this is not going to be as high-end as, say, a pair of Superfeet or Atrix or something like that. But these guys actually, this black portion here is a hard molded material like a plastic. It is bendable. I mean, I can bend it, but it's not the cheap foam insert that you see on most shoes, because those, even though they're squishy, people buy those all the time, and just because it's squishy and soft does not mean that it's the best for your feet, that it's going to be comfortable. Quite the contrary. And we could go into a whole nother video on exercising and stretching your feet and what's right for your feet and what's not, but for right now we're going to cover this. So undoubtedly one of the best pairs of inserts I've ever seen in any pair of shoe right off the market. I'm sure that there's other companies out there that make them, but this is the first one I've come across. And I usually put my Superfeet into the shoe the minute I get it. These guys, I think I'm going to wear these for a while because I really like them. They're super, super comfortable, just the way they are. So that is basically it. I think I said these guys weigh 2 pounds 5 ounces, which is a good pound lighter than a pair of hiking boots, which are going to run around 3 pounds or a little bit more. I've seen some boots out there that'll be under 3 pounds. Mountaineering boots can be well over 4 pounds, even close to 5 pounds, I think. And I have seen people out on the trail wearing mountaineering boots, which I think is pretty funny. On the other hand, you have your trail runners, which are going to run anywhere, they're all over the board, but you can figure around 1 pound, 8 ounces, 6 ounces, 7 ounces, something like that. So depending on what type of backpacking you're doing, whether you're wearing a super heavy pack, if you're, a big person, big boned, you're carrying a lot of weight, a pair of boots might be better for you. If you're very slight of build and you're planning on going ultralight right away, you might do better off with trail runners. Take your time, take your time, take your time. Try on as many different shoes as you can. Research the companies that make it. My work boots, which I wear, are Wolverines, and I wore them for years. And in recent years, they started making them in China. And as soon as they did, the fitting of the shoe went down. I had to go to a wide width. The quality was not there. I mean, I'm still wearing them and they're nice. It's the best pair of shoes I can find that fit my feet and they do well. But the quality when they were being made in the United States has definitely changed. These guys are stationed in Bozeman, Montana, and they're made in the U.S., which to me is awesome. I don't like buying anything out of China if I can possibly help it, which is one of the reasons why I'm selling my cat holder UL right here in the U.S. I make them myself, and that's another video you can check out. It's ultralight backpacking shovel trowel that I make. So yeah, a little plug there, I know. So anyways, 2 pounds, 5 ounces, 135 bucks. Stout, stiff, heavy duty, low cut, waterproof. That about covers it. So next up, I want to talk about how to fit a pair of shoes, because when you go into a shoe store, the sales guy can only do so much. I mean, they measure your foot for the length and the width. They put you in a pair of shoes, and then they do the thing where they go like this, and they say, okay, can you feel your toe? Wiggle your toe. And they wiggle you wiggle your toe, and it's like, okay, is it touching the end of the boot? It's like, no, yes or no. Then they say, okay, then they have you stand up on your toes, and they have you do a couple things to see if it feels like your heel is slipping out of the back of the shoe. And that's about the most they can do. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide this shoe into 4 sections, and we're going to go through each one, and we're going to discuss what they are and how they should feel and what you're looking for. And when you're done, you need to put all 4 of those together into a component that you can then use to learn how to fit a shoe for yourself. And I've learned this from doing research online and from years and years and years of buying good quality work shoes and backpacking wear. And these are just some things I've learned that might help you out. So first off, we're going to look at the 4 sections. One is the toe box, the other one is the instep, the next one is going to be the heel, and the last portion is going to be the footbed. Okay, those are the four areas that we're looking at. So we're going to start with the toe box first. And number one, I can't stress this enough, one of the biggest mistakes that people make, myself included, I've done it in the past, and I really have to be cognizant now when I buy a pair of shoes to make sure that I don't do that, is people buy shoes that are too small for their feet. Every time. I've talked to people that have had foot problems for years because they didn't realize they were consistently buying shoes that were too small for them. So the toe box, basically, just obviously this area right in here, everybody's toes are shaped differently. Some people have toes that go more straight across. They look very, very boxy. They look like a little shoe box. Other people's toes, they tend to curve down more, anywhere in between. When they build a shoe, they make it on what's called a last, okay, which is basically an imitation foot or a fake foot. And every company has their own last, and periodically they will change the design of their last. I'm not sure what their reasoning behind that is, if there's certain trends that they determine. I have no idea. So when you're purchasing from a particular company, if the last that they build their shoes on is similar to your foot, you're going to be great. If they build their shoe built on a last that's not the same as your foot, then it's very possible that all those varieties of shoes by that company are not going to fit you right. So possibly, not always. So okay, so first region, the toe box, as we were discussing, you want to have plenty of room for your toes to wiggle around. A lot of people like that nice, they'll put a pair of shoes on and they're like, ooh, that feels good. You've got to look at wide widths. You have to look at the volume of the toe box. If the toe box sits very, very low and tends to be flattened out, that might be very uncomfortable for your feet. I like a little bit of wiggle room in my toes. I like them to be able to move around. They breathe better, and on downhills, it can save you. When it comes to size fitting also, this is important. They test to make sure that your toes are not touching the end of the boot, but what they don't always tell you is that if you stand on the little, a lot of these places have like a rock where you can go and hold on to a handrail and you can check for lateral support and downhill and uphill. You'll find that if on the uphill, if you pull your feet up real hard like that, that it almost makes the shoe smaller, and it's at that point quite often that your toes can touch the end of the shoe. Or on a downhill, if you get in there and you push hard enough, if you feel your toes touch the end of the shoe, either it's not laced up properly, or it's not the right shoe for you, or it's too small. So you want to make sure that you have ample room in the toe box. The next part we're going to look at is the instep. And the instep is really, really important because that determines the volume of the shoe itself. Some people have what's called a very high instep, which is from this point to this point. Okay, the shoe is going to tend to look more like that. All right, a low instep obviously will be just the opposite. The shoe tends to sit very, very low. All right, so depending on what type of instep you have will determine. You've probably tried on shoes in the past where you go to lace it up and the laces were all the way tight and it still didn't feel like it fit. That's because the shoe had a very high instep and you have a low instep foot. Or vice versa, you put the shoe on and you can't even hardly tighten it up and it already feels tight in here. So the instep portion of the shoe is very, very important that you get that right. Okay, so you've got to be able to, and you have to be able to put the shoe on and feel all these different components and check them individually, and then they all have to come together as a group. Okay, so next up we're going to take a look at the heel cup, and again, some people's heels coming down off their Achilles tendon tend to come straight down. Most people's heel has a little bit of a protrusion towards the back, hence you'll notice that where the Achilles tendon sits, that cuts in a little bit, which cups my heel nicely. If that does not fit properly, you end up with heel slippage, and you might not notice it just walking around in a shoe store, but it will come to rear its ugly head on steep uphills where you're doing this and you'll feel your heel start slipping out of the back of the shoe, and you will end up with a blister that you will not like, and it will be miserable. So making sure that your heel fits into the heel of this shoe, whether it's how narrow the heel is or the contour of the back, how it grips the back of your Achilles tendon, but not too much. I mean, if it's cutting into your Achilles tendon, that can be all bad too. And again, another blister. And you can wear a pair of shoes that seem comfortable, but I guarantee you 10 or 12 miles on the trail in a day, if something's not right, you're going to end up with blisters. And it's not pretty. It's ugly. So last, we're going to take a look at the footbed, and the footbed is all important. All right, and the footbed, when you look at the footbed, and we're going to use the insert as an example. The insert, you've got your arch support right here. Some people have a very high arch support. Some people have a very low arch support. You can have your arch where your arch is forward. You can have it where your arch is more towards the back. Anywhere in between. So that's why I recommend inserts. Quick note on inserts, if you buy an insert, and I generally buy Superfeet. I've had podiatrists make me inserts in the past, and Superfeet actually, for the cost, work pretty well. On an insert, if your arch support tends to be farther forward, you can buy a pair of Superfeet that are slightly larger in size for your foot. And what that does is, because it's for a size, say size 11 as opposed to a size 10, yeah, you're like, well, that's too big for me. I wear a size 10. But what that arch support does is it puts that arch on that particular pair of inserts farther forward. All you have to do then is just trim off a little bit of extra on the front of the insert. If your inserts in the middle or a little bit farther back, stick to the size that fits your foot. And however you trim it, make sure that you do not over trim the front of it. Most people will get it just right, and then they'll find that when they're walking, that all of a sudden now their toes are slipping off the end of that insert, and you'll feel it, and it'll be really uncomfortable, and there's nothing you can do about it. You just ruined a really expensive pair of inserts. So a lot of times what you can do is, if the shoe fits you just perfect, is you can pull out the insert, put one over the top of the other, and trace it and cut it that way, because sometimes you have to take a little bit off of the side. So in short, the contour of the shoe has to fit the contour of your foot. And a lot of times podiatrists will tell you, well, you've got a fallen arch, so they'll make you a insert for the inside of your shoe with a higher arch support. And initially, when you first put them on, it'll hurt. When I first started wearing Superfeet, it bothered my arch support. And now there's no problems. It pulls your arch support back up, and it keeps everything in alignment. And again, you could do a whole nother video on stretching and exercising all the bones and muscles in your feet and around your toes, because if you stop and think about it, they don't get any exercise at all. You put them inside a pair of form-fitting shoes, and they really don't do a whole lot. So again, you just want to make sure that the bottom of the shoe fits comfortable. If anything feels like there's a tight spot or a hot spot, or someplace where there's more pressure than normally you would feel, that could be reason for concern. Okay, so when it's all done and said, everything has to fit together as a component. And one other thing that's really important when you're on downhills, and this is really important, this will decide whether or not your shoe fits right. Uphills, you want to make extra sure that your heel is not slipping out of the back of the shoe. Downhills, you don't want your feet sliding forward, and the deciding factor in what keeps your feet from sliding any farther forward is your toes hitting the end of the toe box. You do not want that, because you will end up with black and blue toenails. You will lose toenails. I've seen it many times, and it happens to a lot of people. What determines that keeps your feet from sliding forward is two things. It's going to be one, and this is to a lesser degree, is the arch support in your insert. That bump right there actually helps to keep your heel in place and will help to keep your feet from sliding forward. The most number one thing that I've discovered for me is the instep. When you're going downhill, if this instep fits the contour of your foot, your instep on your foot, when you're going downhill, your foot will be pressed against the inside portion from here to here, nice and evenly, and that you won't get any what's the word I'm looking for here? Blisters. You won't get blisters up here on the top, because you get a real wide disbursement of pressure from all the way on both sides, all the way from here, all the way up to there. So if this portion of the foot fits this portion of the shoe, along with that arch support in there, will be the determining factor on keeping your feet from sliding forward on downhills. And I can't stress that enough, because that's really, really important. So many people have problems with downhills, and that's a big one. The other thing is, one of the problems I was just saying that I had with my boots is if they're elevated in the back, and you can probably see it with these shoes, is that they're really designed for forward motion, and on downhills it was tough. I mean, granted, the instep was perfect for me, but it just adds a couple of extra degrees of steepness to any downhill that you're doing, and so your quads and your knees are being put under that much more pressure. Finding something kind of neutral that has a little bit of give to it, I think these are going to work well for me. So, all right, so that's it about covered. If you guys have any questions, feel free to post them at the bottom, and I will do my best to get back to you. Again, the Oboz Fire Brand 2 pounds, 5 ounces, $140, and I'll let you know later on down the road how they worked out for me. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out Facebook, Arts Backpacking 360. We'll see you on the trail.